G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to IL-2 Stromovik, the Battle of Stalingrad. Today we're taking a look at one of the two new collector's planes released in the latest patch to IL-2. An incredibly unique aircraft for a combat flight sim. This is the Junkers Ju-52 3M. The Ju-52, and in particular the 3M variant, is an absolute legend amongst aircraft. It first went into production in 1932 and remained in production all the way to 1952. That's 2 decades of production of this aircraft. To go along with that long production run was an equally long service history. The Ju-52 3M remained in military service around the world until the late 1960s and wasn't phased out of commercial air services until the early to mid 1970s. In World War II, the Ju-52 was the workhorse of the Luftwaffe. It was the Luftwaffe's backbone. This plane did a bit of everything. It was a mobile recovery vehicle. It was a cargo transport, both landing to deliver large amounts of supplies or paradropping them over contested zones where no airfields were available. It was a Red Cross unit. It was used for both the deployment and extraction of special forces. It spent a little bit of time as a medium bomber. While Germany still had control of its own airspace, it operated as a civilian airliner. It also operated as a transport for moving high-ranking government and military officials from place to place around Germany during the entirety of the war, usually under heavy escort. In particular, Adolf Hitler's personal transport was a Ju-52 3M. Of course, today we're really only concerned with what our mission is, and we are going to be dropping paratroopers. I'm sure you've seen them through the windows already. Now, the Ju-52 was known for being an extremely durable aircraft and extremely easy to fly, both of which are reflected inside of Battle of Stalingrad. That said, it's best not to tempt fate by doing day missions as much as possible. As a result, this will be a night deployment. Our mission is as follows. This is a Special Forces Squad paradrop. We're taking off at 17:37. Our flight time to target is around about 40 minutes. Weather is initially clear with the fog setting in as the sun goes down. And at time of takeoff we have a 5 meter per second southerly blowing with little to no turbulence. Current temperature at time of takeoff is negative 12 degrees. We're to proceed on heading 085 until we've crossed the Soviet-German front lines on the edge of Stalingrad. Once we have passed the front lines, we're to adjust course to 065 and proceed towards the target zone. Drop altitude is 500 meters and we should be arriving there well after night has fallen. We do have an escort of 2 Bf-109 F4s, however, once we've crossed the German-Soviet border and night has fallen, we shouldn't expect them to stay with us. At that point, we are probably going to lose contact. Now clearly this mission is taking place in single-player IL-2, and there is a reason for that. The way the paratroopers are programmed to operate, or the Ju-52's various mission options are programmed to operate, requires multiplayer servers to make modifications to their objective goals in order for the Ju-52 to be usable, and currently most of the multiplayer servers do not have this in place. As I understand it, Wings of Liberty, you can capture Soviet airfields using Ju-52s, but the number of paratroopers you need to drop is kind of insane. Although that does make sense, as at the moment Soviet forces have no aircraft that can do this to German airfields. And at this time, at least as far as I'm aware, none of the various mission loadouts that are available for the Ju-52 work in any other situation. That being said, this doesn't bother me too much in the context of these kind of missions. The problem with multiplayer is, while facing a human opponent is definitely more realistic than facing a programmed AI in any given situation, the second, player XX Deathbringer 32XX joins and starts talking about what he did to your mother last night, any sense of immersion sort of goes out the window. You really need dedicated serious milsim servers in order to get that real feel, and there aren't too many of them floating around in IL-2 at this time, and the few that do exist I don't think actually have the Ju-52 implemented. Anyways, at this point we can see smoke ahead. This is caused by the detonation of artillery shells coming from the Soviet side. We're approaching the Soviet-German front line, leading into Stalingrad. Now, as you can see at the moment, we're running with navigation lights. I tend to try and play this as realistically as I can when I do these single-player missions. For Ju-52 flights, flying with navigation lights on while in controlled airspace was actually pretty common. The idea here is the plane and the pilot has nothing to hide, and it makes it easier for Allied fighters to find them should they come under attack. A common tactic amongst Ju-52s, if they were under attack while in controlled airspace, was to strobe their navigation lights in order to get the attention of nearby fighters. However, as we are approaching the border, it's time for those to go off so we can make our pass over. Now, in the twilight that we're in at the moment, ground forces will be able to see us cross over, but the sun is going to set once we cross the lines, and the Ju-52, surprisingly, is not a particularly loud aircraft. It was actually incredibly successful in covert troop deployments, much like the one we're performing today, as a result of this. The aircraft's 3 BMW Hornet engines were also extremely well cloaked around the exhaust areas, meaning there were very, very little in the way of exhaust flashes or pops during night operations. This made the plane both hard to hear and hard to visually see in night ops. Its incredibly low stall speed also come into play here, with the aircraft being able to throttle down to as slow as 110 km an hour without actually suffering a wing stall, allowing the aircraft to significantly lower its own noise again by reducing its throttles down from maximum to an extremely low level. This of course coming at the cost of a little bit of airspeed. Anyway, as we are now crossing into the Soviet territories, it's time to jump forward about half an hour as we're on final approach to the drop zone. Now, nothing particularly interesting happened during this 30-minute flight, except that a number of Soviet aircraft were detected and our escorts did break away, and up until this point I haven't seen them again. I know the AI is programmed to return to the aircraft, but at this point I haven't seen them, which is unfortunate because it's usually useful to have them around because it gives the anti-aircraft defences something else to shoot at. Anyways, at this point we should be less than 5 minutes out of our drop zone. I'm currently scanning the horizon line looking for a spot fire, a signal fire, to indicate exactly where I've got to drop the paratroopers. Now, this won't be just a drop in the middle of the forest. The troops are being dropped near a installation. I'm not entirely sure of the nature of the installation, but it is most likely going to be defended by AAA guns, and it is most likely going to have spotlights. And when they finally hear the aircraft coming in, and if you can hear, I've pulled the engines back a little bit, it should light up like daylight. Now, I understand for many the video here will be very dark. I recommend full screen in a darkened room if at all possible in order to be able to see what's going on. I have brightened it up a little bit, so this was actually a little bit darker for me when I was playing it. And hello, there's the spotlight. There is a reason why I didn't want to lighten it up too much, and it's because of these things. Spotlights are horrific. It's not just that if you get caught in the beam that you will become the immediate focus of the majority of AAA in the area and anybody with a gun that could potentially shoot into the sky. It's also what they do inside of the cockpit and how much they blind the pilots when they're finally locked on. It's an effect that's extremely well done in IL-2, and I wanted you to be able to see this for yourself. Anyway, I'm just beginning a right-hand bank at this point. I'm looking for the signal fire. Now we can see we've got some AAA fire going up at the moment. It does look like they're targeting something else, so I'm thinking at this point the 109s may have arrived back just in time. Either that or they're just really poor shots. Now I'm beginning a long left bank. I have a sneaking suspicion our signal fire at this point is going to be somewhere between the now 3 spotlights that are active. And sure enough, as I completed the bank through, I got a quick glimpse of it. It's down below the nose. As I dip the nose down, you'll see it just ahead of the aircraft now, just in the middle window on the left-hand side, just passing below the nose. So I now have a target zone, so I've just got to head straight for it, throttle the engines back, and begin the troop drop. Now, I'm throttling the engines back so I maintain position over the drop zone for as long as I possibly can before having to bail out of the area. I'm carrying 12 troops at the moment. You see the parachutes popping, but not quite as stealthy as I was hoping. Get caught by the spotlight. So throttles back to maximum, continue hard left-hand bank. You can see the lights from a convoy down on the road just below. Now from inside of the cockpit, the pilot of a Ju-52 has virtually no vision behind themselves. So I wanted to bring this around to the left-hand side and see if I can get eyes on the paratroopers. And if you look to the right-hand side of the spotlight, you will see the parachutes just slightly in shadow on the very edges of the light. Having confirmed paratroopers are now away, bank over hard right and start trying to evade the beam. Wing over right, and then I'm going to push the aircraft into a sharp dive, and hopefully I'll be diving too fast for the beam to continue tracking and it will break. And there it goes. It looks like we have evaded the beam. Three spotlights all in a row down one line. The facility, I believe, is the darkened patch on the right hand side, and we drop the troops to the left. So that's the core of our mission completed. Bank over hard right, and I'm going to drop the Ju-52 all the way down to ground level and make it as hard to detect from air as possible, because at this point I'm expecting Soviet fighters will already be coming into the area. It still looks like the AAA is firing at another set of aircraft, so I'm pretty sure I heard an engine note during the core of that, so either there are Soviet aircraft in the area already, or it was the F-4s operating around the zone, and that's what the AAA is trying to get at. It's actually really hard to tell in IL-2, as the game itself will generate dynamic aircraft flights while you're in the middle of a mission, other aircraft doing other roles. So it's quite possible that that is the F-4s, it's quite possible that there could be a flight of HE-111s flying over this area at this very moment at 15,000 feet, and that's what the AAA is trying to get to. There's just no way to be able to tell. Anyways, dropping the 52 down to the deck, keeping the throttles open to maximum at this point. And from here it's back to the navigation. At the moment I'm heading directly west. I'm going to head directly west for probably about a K, and then I'm going to make an adjustment in my direction of travel to start heading back towards the runway. Now what's going on here in the external view is actually what I couldn't see. Two of the spotlights have shut down, the AAA has stopped firing, only one beam is still up and running. With the moon to our back, we've managed to escape the zone. So once again, the trip home was rather uneventful. I did get a little lost on the way back. I lost my bearings, so I had to play spot the landmark a little bit to work out exactly where I was on the map. However, with that small navigational issue sorted out, we're now heading directly towards our home runway, and we're just about to cross back over the Soviet-German front lines. And up ahead you can see a couple of small flickering lights just past the engine. We're passing over the rearward section of the Soviet front lines, and we come across a convoy. I cannot begin to tell you how much I wish I had guns on this thing at this point. Perfect convoy, driving down a road, all soft trucks. Most probably a supply convoy bringing artillery shells, food and fuel to one of the artillery positions. As I said before, much like the aircraft are dynamically generated while you're performing a mission, the same applies to ground forces, with units like this moving around, even though they aren't part of your mission, to enhance the feeling of this being a realistic battleground, with things going on that aren't just related to you and what you're doing. So as I said, those trucks were moving along the back lines of the Soviet front line, as much as that sounds a little confusing. We're now heading up to the direct front. Now just ahead you might see some small flashes straight over the top of the nose cone for the central engine. They are rather faint, so your ability to see them may vary depending on what you have the video playback quality set to. And what these are is the Soviet frontline artillery positions. Now I'm just checking my compass at the moment. I want to make sure I'm still on the correct heading. And we're looking pretty good here. So just up over the nose. You can see them, most certainly see them from the outside. There'll be small flashes in varying positions, ranging from the left to the right hand wingtip. And you can just hear the booms going off in the background now as we're getting close enough. These are the artillery guns that were shelling the German front lines as we passed over them at the start of the mission. And once again, I really wish I had some guns or bombs on this thing, because it's just so neat and tidy to take out. Now these of course are the clearest indicators that from this point on we are now passing over into German airspace, so we are under control. However, I'm not going to turn the nav lights or anything back on just yet. I want to wait till I'm a little bit closer to where I suspect the runway is. Now, landing at night on a frontline runway in World War II. Well, this is a little interesting. Obviously no fancy electric lights, nothing specially set up to light the runways up. In fact, doing so would be bad. Any kind of major lighting that couldn't be easily controlled was likely to light your runway up and make it an extremely visible target for aerial bombing. So what you see in the sky just ahead of us is a flare launch. The runway has heard our aircraft on approach and has fired a couple of flares just to indicate the location of the runway. So as we can see, I was right with my navigation. We were heading direct on for the runway, which is excellent. Now, having seen the flares at this point, I turn on all the navigation lights and I turn on my underwing landing lights. You can't see those yet, but as we approach the ground, you will see them lighting up. Now, in order to land an aircraft on a frontline runway, well, we do need some light that needs to be fairly easily controlled. Generally, what you see in IL-2 is a fairly good representation of what they actually did. Flares launch first to notify the aircraft of the location of the runway so they can make sure they're on track. At which point, once the aircraft gets close, we can see some lights starting up on the ground at the moment. Ground vehicles, trucks and the like, will turn on their headlights, lighting the initial touchdown point for the aircraft. Sometimes the small towers that were set up, the control towers that set up around the runways, would have floodlights on them, but this was relatively rare. And the rest of the runway lighting to indicate where it is was usually a couple of spotting fires just lit down the sides of the runway. Very bad to go off the runway during a night landing in World War II on one of these frontline runways, because if you did, you were likely to put your wing over a fire, and as your wings are likely full of fuel, well, fuel and fuel vapours as you've been consuming fuel during the flight, it could lead to an explosive end. So the runway's coming up on the left hand side, and you can see the fires have started up down the runway. It looks like we've got 6 fires, as well as 2 vehicles parked at the end of the runway lighting up the touchdown zone. 2 fires are just beyond the headlights of the vehicles, 2 a little bit further on, and 2 down the end, just to give us some guidance for the runway. And as you can see, the runway itself, I actually haven't changed the lighting on this section at all. The runway itself is just a dark patch in amongst it all. So, left-hand bank past the runway, so I can get a little bit of a look at exactly how it's laid out and where I'm going to have to land, get my bearings. Then I'm beginning a long right-hand bank into a large turn, at which point I will start a spiral descent and line up for touchdown. Now I've already got the throttles back at about 70% at this point, so I'm starting to drop the aircraft's airspeed, using the turn as a braking maneuver as well. Just gently nose down at this point. I don't want to lose too much altitude too quickly. And just looking out the right window, waiting to see the lights of the runway, and then I'm going to sharpen up the turn to a line. Now I do have to take into account we have got a southerly which will be blowing slightly across the runway and pushing me to the left. And drop the throttles back to about 50%. And then gently pull them back to about 30%, only leaving enough power on to maintain glide. And we've slightly overcorrected here. They could bend the wind, it could have been I just didn't turn quite tight enough, I'm not entirely sure. But easy enough to adjust for, I have room. As I said, the glide speed of the Ju-52 is incredible. And from the externals we can now see the night lighting for landing, lighting up the ground beneath us as we're on approach. Just ruddering over to straighten up as we come in for touchdown. We're going to be landing slightly left of centre, but that's perfectly fine considering the conditions. And we suffer momentary flash blindness right on touchdown as we pass into the headlights of the vehicles, but that fades away as we pull out, and it's just on the brakes. Full back on the stick to keep the nose high, and this was a pretty straightforward, simple and smooth landing, especially considering the conditions. Anyways, ladies and gents, with that touchdown, it's time to bring this video to a close. Hope you've enjoyed jumping around in the Ju-52 in a nice night mission. I'll try and bring it out in daylight sometime soon so you can get a much better look at the aircraft. I just thought this would be an interesting mission to actually look at. Hopefully some more multiplayer servers will pick up the Ju-52's rather unique mission profile soon, and we'll be able to do some multiplayer missions in it as well. Anyways, ladies and gents, remember to click that like button, subscribe if you want to see more and you haven't already, and until next time, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.